Okay guys, alright, so most of you guys know Dan as Dan the Man. He's an assistant instructor and a trainee here. But Dan leads many different lives outside the sailing club. I've had to write down everything that he is here, there's so much. So basically, Dan is the secretary of the Young Greens and Wicklow Green Party and a 3 times Young Environmentalist winner of the award for 3 years running. Yeah. So
2 years running, I
2
just
years
won 2 this year.
Well, there you go. So that just shows some achievements from Dan. So what Dan has kindly agreed to do for us today, he's going to give us a talk on plastics, the world and us. As you guys probably know, like there's a big move on plastics at the moment, especially around beaches and any kind of wildlife and sea life. So Dan is hopefully going to give you a good talk on it now. Please give him your undivided attention for the talk. And then also after that we're going to head down to the beach and hopefully do a bit of a clean up on plastics as well. So, alright, so without further ado, Dan, if you want to get going.
I think Jack now has quite successfully introduced the topic there, so I'll just take it away now.
When I was a boy, I remember very vividly my teacher at school telling the school that a new era had dawned, that suddenly this marvellous new substance called plastic had been invented, and it was light and it was cheap and it could be used for a multitude of things. And so that in centuries to come, you'll look back on the 20th century and say that was the plastic period. He was truer than he knew.
Back around the dawn of the 20th century, a new wonder material was invented. It was light, it was cheap, it was durable. It became known as plastic as we know it now. Now its development started earlier, but it really picked up steam in the 1960s. And plastic was genuinely a truly fundamentally revolutionary material. You could make sterile products, you could make strong and cheap products. Almost everything at that stage became made of plastic because it was so versatile and it was so useful. Look around you now. Almost everything you look at is made of plastic. Your clothes, our computers, even the cars we drive have large amounts of plastic in them. And you can't understate the amount of use that they had. And it revolutionised the world because people could now get a lot more stuff for a lot cheaper. Plastic also coincided with the large expansion of oil production, as plastic itself is made from crude oil. It was originally recognised as a byproduct in making petroleum and the like. But when they discovered that they essentially had this abundant amount of leftover product of the crude oil, they then made plastic so cheap and so abundant. And as crude oil was abundant all over the world, from Texas to Saudi Arabia, you could make vast amounts of quantities of it. So then, later on in the kind of development of plastics, someone came up with the idea of it was so cheap and it was so useful, you don't need to keep it. You can actually just toss it away when you're done. So that brought about a new revolution in stuff, a kind of single-use plastic revolution. You could package food in clean packaging that was attractive and was sterile. This kind of revolution in single-use plastics revolutionised hygiene, it revolutionised health, because now you had easy and safe ways to keep stuff clean and safe. And then for consumers, it meant you could get a bottle of water for 10 euro, no, for €1, and various other things. And when you're done, you just threw it out. And that changed our world. Because in the past, before that, you would, if you wanted to go on a camping, you'd bring a metal flask with you. If you wanted to have a sandwich, you'd have to pack it up in a box or wrap it in paper. Now you can just go camping, bring your stuff with you, get rid of it. If you're going out for some food or something with your friends in a park, same thing.
And so that in centuries to come, you'll look back on the 20th century and say that was the plastic period. He was truer than he knew. Because although it was all those advantages, the mere fact that it was indestructible meant that it could not be thrown away. Plastic manufacturers happily said, once you've used this, throw it away, discard it. There is no way, because plastic is so permanent and so indestructible that when you cast it into the ocean, or indeed into your dustbin, it does not go away.
This throwaway culture of plastics and the sheer amount of it started to create a new problem. Plastic pollution. Plastic, as its nature suggests, and what made it such a revolutionary material, it being strong, cheap and indestructible, became an environmental downfall for it. As if you've got something that's so cheap to get away, people just toss it out into the seas, into the oceans. Up until the 1990s in the United States, waste, rubbish, landfill stuff was dumped just straight into the oceans. And so what you had is you had vast amounts of waste collecting in the oceans. Now most products that you get, like wood or paper, they naturally rot over time. Small animals, sunlight, various forces of nature break it down into stuff, and then it eventually goes away. This isn't the case with plastic. Plastic stays around forever. It just gets smaller and smaller and smaller until a state where it's no longer recognizable. So here we have the first stage of kind of plastic degradation, a product breaking down from its recognizable form into microplastics. So it no longer looks what it is. You can see different ideas. So you see natural materials like wood and cardboard. They take 2 months, 1 to 3 years. And cotton, like in a cotton shirt, takes 2 to 5 months. Whereas if you contrast that to a plastic bottle, 450 years, fishing lines, 600 years. These products stay around for ages and ages and ages, and they won't go away. And then, once they have degraded after this amount of time, they become a new substance known as microplastics, which I'll get back to later.
Every year, some 8 million tons of it ends up in the ocean. And there, it can be lethal.
A healthy albatross chick in its diet should really have things like squid, so we can find the squid beaks that come out of the pellet, and also things like fish, so we can find fish bones as well.
But these chicks are being fed something very different.
We have some plastic that this poor chick has had to bring up. Plastic bag. Here we have some food packaging, looks like rice. Luckily for this chick, he has managed to get this out of his stomach, so fingers crossed he doesn't have any more plastic left in there before he fledges.
For other chicks, plastic can be fatal.
Unfortunately, there was a plastic toothpick that had actually gone through the stomach. Something just as small as that has managed to kill the bird. It's really sad to see.
Lucy collects and records what plastic she finds around the nests.
These are all items that were regurgitated just from last season. And that's going to be a vast underestimation because that's just the ones that we happen to find. There'll be many more that we never see being brought back.
So what you see there is plastic. It's gone out, it's polluted everywhere, and it gets into our ecosystem. And that was just a demonstration here of how it affects albatrosses up in Scotland. Now, this picture here is from Skellig Michael, where they filmed the most recent Star Wars movie. And you can see one of the problems they actually had when they got to the island was it was covered in rubbish. All the rubbish from kind of Southern Ireland gets washed out into the rivers and washed up onto the islands then. So here's just a demonstration of gannet nests. We actually have some gannets up around near Bray Head. And you can see this is just a picture of breaking down the kind of stuff there, such as you get fishing rope, netting plastic, plastic bags, rope, more stuff there, more sacks. And you can see these are plastic materials. In this case here, a lot come from fishing and industry, where once they get discarded there, they just stay in our environment and they collect in any kind of rocky outcroppings near the sea. But the bulk of our plastic doesn't actually end up on land, it ends up making our way into the oceans itself.
He floats on a trickle that reaches a stream that flows into a river, and a river that reaches the ocean. After months lost at sea, he's slowly drawn into a massive vortex where trash accumulates, a place known as the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Here, the ocean's currents have trapped millions of pieces of plastic debris. This is one of 5 plastic-filled gyres in the world's seas. places where the pollutants turn the water into a cloudy plastic soup. Some animals, like seabirds, get entangled in the mess. They and others mistake the brightly colored plastic bits for food. Plastic makes them feel full when they're not, so they starve to death and pass the toxins from the plastic up the food chain. For example, it's eaten by lanternfish. The lanternfish are eaten by squid. The squid are eaten by tuna, and the tuna are eaten by us. And most plastics don't biodegrade, which means they're destined to break down into smaller and smaller pieces called microplastics, which might rotate in the sea eternally.
This here is a picture of the just a small section of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch here near Hawaii here. You can just see it off there. And you can see it collects into these massive strains of plastic there. And it's hard to actually estimate the area because unlike most accumulations of plastic stuff we think of as just kind of solid on the land, it actually goes deeper into the water and is kind of porous itself. That's what a picture of it looks like from underneath, and you can see you just get these massive accumulations of rubbish. But there are more around the world. There's the Pacific, there's two in the Atlantic, one in the North Atlantic and one in the South Atlantic. The North Atlantic one will be the one where all of Ireland's rubbish is going to, and then you'll get one in the Indian Ocean. So as the video mentioned there, microplastics, these are the real big problem. They're tricky to deal with. As I mentioned there earlier, remember I showed you that big table of how long it takes various products to biodegrade? This is what they turn into here, small beads kind of plastic and the like. As a material, plastic in this form, it just gets smaller and smaller, but it never breaks down not into plastic. And the problem it has is there are a lot of very toxic chemicals in plastic which have bad effects on our environment, such as they can make it harder for animals to reproduce, and they absorb toxins. And so any toxins that get into the water, plastic sucks it up, and then they get into the food stream. As the video demonstrated, that will slowly work its way up to us. That's kind of a picture there of what the kind of trash patches look like. So we've just got a little map there of where you've got each patch. So as you can see, it's just a big kind of mass of stuff collecting in these areas where the water kind of just circulates. You're using your current. So when you're sailing any long distance or if you're on the water, this is becoming an increasing problem for maritime users, both people using it for recreation and people who need to use it for their livelihoods. And it is an evolving problem and we are looking at it.
We have to act. We have to act now to try and clear up and repair some of the appalling damage that we've made to the ocean. And that is going to require positive action. But there is also much simpler things we can do to prevent it getting much worse. And that is to make a demand on people who put the plastic into our lives. A, to make that plastic much easier to recycle, and B, not to use it gratuitously, not to encourage us to put elaborate packaging to titillate us, and then, having done that, to chuck it into the waste paper basket. That's the appalling thing, because it adds cost to the object, it adds cost to the you that you have to pay, but you have to pay a much, much bigger price, and our children will have to pay a much bigger price unless we change our behaviour now.
So this isn't an insolvable problem. This is, while humanity has caused this problem, humanity completely has the tools to solve this problem. It's well within our reach. We know what we have to do to solve it, and we know how to go about it to solve it. So what are these things we can do? What are these things that can seem to be such an insurmountable project? So it's tackling massive gyres of waste in our oceans. Well, you get individual change. If we as individuals choose to get rid of plastic, then we're not producing it. This comes down to simple things such as using reusable, sustainable containers for our stuff. When you go to the shop, instead of buying ketchup in a plastic bottle, buy it in a glass bottle. When you get some coffee, rather than get a single-use coffee cup, bring a reusable cup like this. And there's a lot of things we can do that reduces our own impact. And if we did this on a larger scale, then it ends up adding up. And this is really catching on this movement, particularly around shops and the like. Costa have recently introduced fully biodegradable coffee cups. where if you buy it and you throw it out, it's made of natural materials, and so it will just rot and turn into compost in the oceans. And Starbucks, Insomnia, if you bring a reusable cup like this, they'll actually give you a discount on your coffee if you buy it with this cup, because they don't have to give you a single-use one. They don't have to give it to you. So there's a lot of ways for you to do this, and there's a lot of support behind it. There's also community action, which I'm sure Ian is more than familiar with here. This is my school's own project here. I'm from Newport Comprehensive, and we became the first single-use plastic-free school in Ireland. That means on the school level, we put in about policies and we encouraged natural change, where we said, let's get rid of our use of single-use plastics. We know the damage it does, we know how it's affecting things, so let's get rid of it. We actually ended up as a school winning 2 Young Environmentalists Awards last year. We won the Senior Climate Change Award and the overall National Award last year for it, so it's been a massive success. And that's a picture of some of us up with the Mayor of Dunleary. These group changes that you can do, they have a similar effect as individual change, but on a much larger scale. Then you also have the obvious things you can do. You may see people down on the beach who are cleaning up their plastic, getting rid of it. Clean Coasts is an absolutely fabulous group. They're a community-led group, and they are organised all over the country. And they simply go out on a regular basis and clean up beaches, because it's tricky to deal with the plastic once it's in the oceans. But if we let it never get into the oceans in the first place, that's a massive step change there. And Clean Coasts, they do fabulous work across the country for it. There are different levels of these change, and it is solvable. This isn't an issue here that we just say, this is so insurmountable. We can do this. If there is will and if people want it, we can address this issue. And it addresses our maritime life, it affects us, and it affects everyone. And so, does anyone want any questions or anything about this? Cool.
Okay, big round of applause for that. Yeah, as I say, thanks a million. So what we're going to do is we're going to break off into groups, and first of all we're going to head off to the North Beach, and Dan's going to show you something that's up there. And then after that we're going to bring buckets with us, and we're going to do a clean up along Bray Beach and see what rubbish and plastic we can find, and hopefully clean up and do our bit for the environment.
Can I just say something very important to Dan?
Yes, you can.
Dan, your mother must be very proud.